People who got fired for the stupidest reason. What happened? Worked at Best Buy in the mid-90s when I was 16. I worked selling computers, and was pretty good at it. We also sold things like memory, and hard drives that were behind lock and key. Part of our job was to take the tagged inventory from the trucks, and put it on the shelves. This included said memory. So I close one night, put away all the new inventory, lock it up, and hand the keys to the manager. They do their checks of our department and we leave for the night. Next day I'm scheduled, I go in and the loss prevention manager said he has me on video stealing memory. I laughed and said, "Show me the video." Well, I'm somewhat tall, red hair, and white. The video he shows me has an older, very short, white guy with a shaved head. He told me that it was me, and that I was fired, and only showed me the video once, and immediately turned off the monitor. Being 16, I didn't know any better, said some things on my way out, like "fuck you, fuck this place," and the like, and I left. Turns out the loss prevention guy and his son were stealing for years to the tune over $250,000, and the guy on the video he showed me was his son. Anytime problems popped up of missing inventory, they just fired a random person to keep the attention away from themselves. When police arrested them, their house was loaded with televisions, computers, everything from the store. Dr. fired for stealing when the video was of the loss prevention manager's son stealing. I had a manager write me up for not attending a meeting that she scheduled on a Sunday night, that I was out of town. I'd written my request on the calendar she used for time off, and she approved it, in writing, on the calendar. I got back from my mini vacation to find they'd implemented a few new practices that I wasn't aware of. I called another store to see if someone could explain one to me, and got a snotty "if you hadn't skipped the meeting last Sunday, you'd know," followed by a hang-up in my ear. I went to the office, looked through a few papers on the desk to see if any instructions were there, found those, along with a write-up for an unexcused absence for the meeting. I immediately took a picture of that, took a picture of the calendar still hanging on the wall that showed my request, along with the approval, and waited. When the manager showed up, along with the district manager, I was called into the back room. Office was too small for 3 people, and read the riot act for skipping the meeting. I was presented the write-up, which I refused to sign. When the district manager asked why I wasn't going to sign it, I showed her the photo of the calendar that had the approval written on it. The manager went and got the calendar, which now had convenient whiteout marks on it, and said she'd revoked my permission 2 weeks earlier when the meeting had been scheduled. I then showed the district manager the timestamp for the photo, 2 hours earlier. I was sent back to the sales floor while the manager and district manager spoke. A short time later, I was called back in, where I received the shittiest apology I'd ever heard. A few months later, the manager left the HR file drawer open, and since there were no cameras in the office, I looked at my file. The write-up was in there, along with the worst forgery of my signature ever. I of course took a picture of it, and when I left the company for good a few months later on 4 hours' notice, included that picture with the email I sent to every major office in the company, detailing all the abuse and misbehavior of the store manager and district manager. That's fucked, especially the not being there when they needed me reasoning. A similar thing happened to me. Job was working at a glorified customer service call center for a popular online game. I put in a vacation request months in advance. I come back from my vacation and a patch or something had made the game shit itself, and they'd altered people's schedules and enacted mandatory overtime. Manager brought me into his office to write me up because I was a no-show during 2 of the days I was on the vacation that I'd cleared with everyone months before. This company has the worst, most spineless, insecure little men in management of any place I've worked at even to this day, so I just played hardball and refused to sign the written warning. Written warnings were big because they fucked with your yearly raise and bonuses/profit sharing. I came in hot with email printouts of my request for time off and his approval. Manager was visibly pissed but knew I had him dead to rights. I walked out of the room and didn't hear about it again. Thought of another one. This would have been one of my first jobs that I didn't even get a chance to start. I applied to be a deckhand on a local ferry. Went though unpaid training as part of the interview process. First aid, CPR, crisis management, safety policy whatnots. All group interviews. Anyway, I got the job after about a week. I also got my offer in writing with the expected start date. That was going to be a Tuesday 2 weeks later, and I remember this detail because it went to shit. I accept and sign and take my copy. I was thrilled. I was going to be on the water and making money for the summer. My friends were hanging out down by the water when I left the interview, so I went and told them all about it and the start date, etc. Again, cementing that start date in my mind, so I was ready. The following week, a week before I was supposed to start, I got a call from the office asking where I was. We expected you to be here an hour ago, and so on. I asked them to check the offer that I had signed because I was never told that my start date had changed. I mean, I was available and explained that I'd be happy to come down right away, but I hadn't known of any changes. They checked, agreed that they had made the mistake, and then told me that, nevertheless, a miscommunication this early on was a bad sign and they would not be hiring me. So I was let go because someone put down the wrong date. I worked with a guy who was the head of another department. He complained regularly, for years, that no one on his staff could do about 5 key things in his department except him, and that he couldn't train any of them because of their heavy and constant workload. These complaints were legitimate. One Friday in 2020, while his department was one of the only departments still working on site because their jobs couldn't be done remotely, he sent out an email saying, effective 5 p.m. today, I will be retiring. I have enjoyed my 25 years with. Those of you to whom I have given my contact information should feel free to contact me anytime you'd like to talk. He'd given his phone number to those of us who were his friends outside of work, and no one else. His department immediately fell apart, and his management went completely crazy. They tried to get his contact info from HR, who wouldn't give it to them, as he was officially retired, and then they tried to get his info from those of us who had it. We all denied having his number. Of course, several of us called him nightly to tell him the tales of his former bosses trying, and failing to do his job. It was glorious. I didn't get fired. My managers know I'm valuable to the team, their words, but a similar thing happened. I made the stupid mistake of saying call me if you need me, and he added me to the schedule the next day. At 9 p.m. So, I woke up in the morning, saw that my schedule had been updated, didn't think anything of it, so I dismissed the notification. They mess with scheduling a lot, and started reading. 8 o'clock rolls around, and guess who I get a call from? Yep, my boss. Hey, where you at? At home. Why? Didn't you see I added you to the schedule? What? Yeah, I added you to the schedule. You can work today. Dang it, yeah, I'll be there. I woke up my mother who, at the time, was working absolutely screwed hours and needed her sleep. She took me to work, and, of course, I was mad and I showed it, which happens next to never. I don't stay mad long. I thought you said that I could add you when I needed you, was his justification. Later, I told my parents what happened, and they told me that if they do that to me again, I'm not obligated to go into work. Lesson learned. I have also never told my boss to call me when he needs me. I've realized that my home life is more important than 9.85 an hour. Got fired from a public library for taking 2 carts to collect books from the outside drop box instead of 1. The past few times I emptied the drop box on a Monday it required 2 trips, so I brought 2 carts instead. It turns out the matter of how many carts were used in emptying the drop box was a matter of a library board vote, and I was in violation of a town ordinance. Mind you, I wasn't fired. I was placed on paid administrative leave pending a library board inquiry at which I was welcome to call witnesses. I couldn't keep a straight face, so I resigned. During my senior year in high school, I was working at McDonald's. It was right after Christmas and we were really busy. I'd been there 4 hours, had 2 to go, was supposed to get a 30-minute break. Since we'd slowed down, I asked if I could have a break. The shift manager said no one was getting breaks. I said thanks a lot. She told the assistant manager, pretty sure they were sleeping together, that I told her to fuck off. He fired me on the spot. Wouldn't even let me give my side of the story. A week later I was working at Jack in the Box. Was a shift manager in 6 months, did that through a couple years of college, dropped out, never wanted to go anyway, and moved up to assistant manager, and then a couple years later, general manager. I remembered how shitty I was treated at McDonald's and made sure I treated my employees well. Had the 3rd lowest turnover rate in a 95 restaurant region, had the 2nd highest average hourly pay, and number 2 in profit improvement. Take care of your people and they'll do the same for you. Last place I was working, not outside knives allowed. Provided. Those crappy little stamped and folded ones, with an insert holding a razor blade. Needless to say, they sucked. Everyone brought and used their own. Eventually they made a big ass stink about it. Anyone found using a non-company knife would be suspended. So we asked for knives. We don't have any. Right, everyone keeps using their own, needless to say. Weeks later, big ass company meeting. Right in that little gap as day is clocking out, Graveyard Inn. Owner of company makes a big speech about the knives. One of the new kids from Graveyard raises his hand, "Excuse me, sir? But they told us they don't have any." Oh, big ass hoopla goes on. See, stuff like that comes in during the day. Markers we sometimes use, tape we need, pens for us, knives, and day shift management takes them, and locks them in their cabinets that nobody at night can unlock. Ha. ETA, thanks for the love, Reddit. This happened over 20 years ago, at a medical insurance company. I didn't sue them, mostly because I was young and just didn't know that could be a thing. I'd do it again. I wasn't looking for kudos, someone needed help so I did what was needed. I didn't have any idea that it was against company policy. We certainly didn't cover it in my training class. Oh, and the lady didn't call her insurance company instead of 911. We were trying to solve an issue with one of her claims. I came back to her having an emergency after I'd had her on hold. I worked in a customer service call center for an insurance company. A customer called in and had a medical emergency, probably a heart attack, but I'm not sure, while I was on the phone with her. I used the phone in the empty cubicle next to me to call 911 and stayed on both lines to be sure that EMS got to her. I was fired because A, I took too long on calls already and this was exceptionally long, B, I made an unauthorized outgoing call, and C, I gave the customer's personal information, name and address, out to the 911 operator. Back in the olden days, when I was the store manager of a KFC, I actually had this situation happen. I had been a shift manager before a store manager, and this really good worker K seemed to only get scheduled on my shifts. See, I had actually worked my way up from the cook room to management, but I wasn't really that strong on the serving and boxing assembly line. She was really good, and I definitely relied on her more than I possibly should have. Either way, I asked my other managers why she never ever gets scheduled with them, and they told me how moody she was for them, but seemed to work great for me. Kay would often come in pretty upset, because she was in an abusive relationship. We would often start every shift with a 20 minutes convo, anything you want to talk about. I need you to be ready to work, so let's figure this out, and see if we can get through this shift. If not, I understand, we'll figure something else out. Her shitty abusive boyfriend started just sitting in the lobby for hours on end, ordering a soda and refilling. I eventually had to tell him that if he ever showed up here again, I would be calling the police for trespassing. That night, he beat the shit out of her, because he thought we were fucking, because that's the only way anyone would care about her like I did, and she actually left him. He's now doing a handful of years for holding up a convenience store. Haven't seen her since I left that job a few months later. Hope she's doing well. It was my second job after high school. I was 18 going on 19. I was a parts delivery driver for a local auto parts store. All the drivers had to report to a dispatcher. She would tell us where to go and what to do, basically my supervisor. She had at least 10 to 12 years on me, so I was basically fresh meat in the store. After 4 months or so, she started getting more comfortable with me. She would rub my shoulders / try go give me back rubs, would buy me lunch, would text me on weekends inviting for drinks. This one weekend she was being a little too persistent in texting me, so I politely told her that I was not interested. Well, come Monday morning I got fired because apparently I had not been doing my job properly. I got fired from my first ever job as a CIT, counselor in training, at the summer day camp I went to every year as a kid. I was given the 6-7-year-olds. One of them asked me if I had a girlfriend. In a girls are gross, why would you do that sort of way, and I said yes. He asked me if I ever kiss her, and I said yes, in a fun, horror movie voice manner. He was like, ew. Gross. We all had a laugh. I thought it was a fun exchange. Well, I guess the kid went home and told his mom that night, and she freaked out. Demanded I be fired for teaching her child about sex and giving details of my sex life to her child. I was 13. All I said was that I kissed a girl. The camp fired me right there. I had no idea what I said was out of line. My pest control guy told me a story about how he lost a customer. She was asking him about his family, and he said that he has 8 kids. She replied in a disdainful tone, "You know how that happens, right?" He said, "Yeah, my wife is beautiful." She flipped out, fired him as her pest guy, complained to the woman who'd recommended him, and went on Facebook / Google / etc. to say he'd been talking to her about his sex life and was extremely inappropriate. Like, there was no way he could have won. She wanted to insult him for the size of his family and didn't like that he had a comeback. He's actually a really cool dude and his company does well, so he can absolutely support his big family, so more power to him. I did the exit interview crap, but only because I gave 3-week notice. 4 weeks was the custom there if you weren't being pushed out, so I did feel almost slightly bad, but I was on the clock so I didn't care. When my wife quit, they wanted to do a 2-hour exit interview the Tuesday following her last day. She said, "Not unless you change my last day to Tuesday." If they had agreed, they would have had to credit her with another 6 hours of leave, because her position got 6 hours credited at the start of each 2-week pay period and paid for the Monday holiday, Labor Day, 2 hours of work and 6 hours of time off earned. They decided that urgently needed exit interview wasn't worth $3.92. My brother worked part-time in a hardware store. In winter, the low season, the store would stop scheduling the newest employees, and would start scheduling them again in spring. My brother was one of the new guys and wasn't scheduled in the winter. In the middle of spring, he went to check when he would start again. There was a new manager he didn't know, and she told him he wasn't on the employee list. Without a reason. Apparently they just assumed he wouldn't work again and terminated him without telling him. Since we have good labor laws, my brother got a few thousands in settlement for lost income.